Welcome back to Account Management Secrets. Today's guest is someone I've known for a long time, Adrian Davis. He is the president and CEO of Whetstone Inc., and he's also the author of Heroes, Villains, and the Thrill of Professional Selling, a fantastic book. Adrian has trained and advised some of the top sales and account management teams in the world. And what sets his work apart is how deeply he understands the emotional and the strategic forces that drive complex deals and complex customer relationships. In this episode today, we talk about Adrian's hero journey framework, why your customer is the hero, why you're not the hero, and how to step into the role of a trusted guide instead. We talk about the difference between heroes, villains, and flaws, how to use storytelling to drive urgency in your deals and in your customer conversations, and why the best account managers aren't pitching solutions, rather they are rewriting the script with their clients. This conversation is packed with all sorts of insights that you can use today. Things like why the status quo is the real villain, how to identify your customer's strategic aspirations, how to trigger motion and get things moving again when your buyer feels stuck. So whether you're managing $1 million account or $100 million portfolio, you're going to walk away from this episode with sharper tools on how to reframe and get things moving to your advantage and to help the customer meet their goals. Let's get into it with Adrian Davis. If you're an account manager, you already know this. You're the one keeping the business running. You own the client relationships, drive the revenue, and solve the tough problems for your customers. But here's the challenge. Most companies don't give account managers the training or recognition they deserve. That's what you'll get here on the Account Management Secrets podcast. I'm Alex Raymond, and after working with thousands of account managers, I know what separates the best from the rest. In this show, we cover exactly what you need to succeed, handling tough client conversations, driving renewals and upsells with confidence, and proving your value every single day. There's no fluff, no outdated sales tactics, just real practical strategies you can use right now to grow your accounts and build a successful career. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit subscribe and let's get into it. Hey, Adrian, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me on Account Management Secrets.
Thanks so much for having me, and great to see you again.
Yeah, I've known you for a long time and followed your journey, followed your work. I was super excited and intrigued and wanted to talk to you today about the concept of the hero's journey in sales and account management. I think that's a really fun and interesting topic that our audience is going to appreciate. And this comes from your book, which is Heroes, Villains, and the Thrill of Professional Selling. That's quite a title. I like it a lot.
Right.
Why don't we just start with what inspired you to frame this as a hero's journey? Like, how did you come up with these concepts? And then, of course, we're going to get into it a little bit more deeper, but just tell us, how this came about and how this manifested for you.
It's a great question, Alex. So the hero's journey is not something that I made up. This is an archetype. It's well known. If you think about Star Wars or any of these big blockbuster movies, they all follow this archetype because it's how the brain is wired. The brain is wired that we are heroes in our own movie. And when we're watching a movie and we sort of connect to the characters on the screen, we end up living vicariously through those characters and living out the hero's journey. So we sort of know what to expect. We're on this ride, and the script writers are writing for our subconscious minds because they understand how the mind is wired. So I didn't understand any of this, Alex. What I understood as a sales guy is that telling stories works. So I was hired by a company out of Silicon Valley. I was living in Toronto at the time, and I was going to represent them in Canada. And so they flew me out to Silicon Valley to meet with my colleagues for a sales conference. And I would then come back to Canada to represent them. And I would be the lone salesperson in Canada. And so I think it was just intuitive to start asking my colleagues and my peers, where have you been successful? And they would tell me, and I would just jot down in the back of my Franklin Covey planner, just the gist of the story. So I came back with quite a few stories, and I just started to tell them. I was selling very complex technology, leading edge technology that was fairly complex, hard to explain, takes time to explain. But I just found by telling stories, people would get it right away. And I was extremely successful. And this was during an economic downturn when guys were getting laid off because they were not able to hit half their quota. I was at 300% of quota. And I could have gone higher, but I stopped selling because the company couldn't keep up with the implementations. And it became an integrity issue for me. Long story short, I left that company. I was making a ton of money, but I wasn't comfortable making money and not being able to fulfill our promises. So I just took some time off, and I knew I wanted to be a speaker. So I joined this organization called Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and they had a breakout at one of their conferences on storytelling. And I'm like, wow, I've got to attend that. I know storytelling works. Yeah. So I attended this conference, and it was a journalist who was explaining his journey and how he struggled as a journalist until he came to understand the hero's journey as an archetype and began writing his articles using this archetype. And I'm sitting there in the audience, and the light bulb just went on. It's like, without knowing it, that's what I was doing. I was telling stories, and my key stakeholders were putting themselves in the story and vicariously experiencing the rise and the fall and the rise in the story, that roller coaster of emotion, where they would come out and they would have a natural aversion to failure. They didn't want that. And they would have an attraction to the success. They wanted that. And I just realized that's why I was so successful. So it's not something I made up. It's something that I experienced and then realized what I was doing when it was explained to me.
Well, it's great to have this kind of a system and a structure when you're talking to customers. So the context for this is during a sales conversation, which could be new business. I assume also upsell, renewal, cross sell as well, right? And so we start to be aware that stories are powerful here. And I know that the book is done in acts, right? Like, so it talks about the different acts in a story, and there's obviously different arcs and crests to how you do this. So there's quite a lot involved, and I'd imagine that one of the things that we want to do if we're listening to this and we're thinking, oh, I need to get into storytelling like this as well, is be pretty thoughtful about how to start. What are your recommendations about that? So what are the first kind of steps, if you will, on doing something like this with storytelling?
So I think storytelling can be quite complex. Even the hero's journey can be quite complex. I've just simplified it for sales. And really what salespeople need to understand is that a story has 3 acts. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in the beginning, we need to understand, what is the hero's aspiration? What do they want? And I think this is foundational. I think if just from this podcast, if somebody's listening, what's one idea that they can take away? I would say the most important idea is this, that understanding a customer's needs, I don't want to say it's unimportant, but I want to say it's boring. Like, if you start there, if you go in saying, I have to understand this customer's needs, expect to be mediocre in terms of your success.
By the way, that's where a lot of us start. That's what a lot
Yes.
of us are trained to do. That's where we start, is like, what do
What
you
are the
need?
pain
What are you
points?
trying to get out of this? Stuff like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
What the hero's journey helps us understand is that people are motivated and emotionally engaged in their aspirations. So we need to find who is we call the hero, the main character. We may call them the economic stakeholder. Who's the main character? They're going to have 2 attributes. Number 1 is they're going to have an aspiration that is strategic in nature, and failure is not an option. They have to achieve this thing. It's a deep desire. The way I like to describe this is, people don't need to change the world. They want to. Think of Steve Jobs. He didn't have to change the world. Elon Musk doesn't have to send somebody to Mars, but
Right.
they get obsessed by these aspirations and they change the world. So we're looking for who is the key stakeholder in this organization and what is their aspiration, not what they need, not their pains, their aspiration. What is their strategic aspiration where failure is not an option? That's the foundation of strategy. That's where all strategy begins. The other attribute we're looking for is they have authority over resources. Because when that aspiration is challenged, they're going to flex their authority to pivot resources to make sure that they can still be successful. So that we're looking for who's the main character, what is their strategic aspiration, and let's be sure that they really do have authority over resources. Sorry.
Okay, got it. So we're looking, so aspiration plus resources equals results
Correct.
in this framework.
Correct.
And on aspirations, we're taught as account managers, like literally one of the first things, and this has come out of my mouth many, many times, is like, go figure out what your customers' goals are. Now you're doing this deeper. You're saying, what are the aspirations of the individuals that you're talking to? And by the way, then you're qualifying that to say, make sure the people you're talking to who have aspirations also control resources. It can also basically get stuff done, right?
And,
So
and, and you're touching on something that's really important,
yeah.
Alex, and it's just the emotional aspect of this work.
Mm-hmm.
That I could be selling to a multi-billion-dollar organization, and I have some multi-million-dollar solution to sell to them. But and we can be very professional about this. But what really moves people are their emotions. And so behind this multi-billion-dollar organization, there is an individual with a strategic aspiration that they are emotionally driven by. And if I'm going to be successful, this is where I start. Who is that person that is driving? So another way I'll put it is committees do not win Guinness World Records, right? Committees don't win awards. Individuals do. They drive the organization forward. So as an
Mm-hmm.
account manager, the first thing I want to know is who are those key stakeholders in the organization that they're irrational in their desire for progress. They want something. And if you get in their way and you're an employee, you're fired. It's like, we don't need you here. And everybody that is here to serve my aspiration. That's who we're looking for.
Got it. And so this it's a significant level deeper than simply saying, the company's goals are to launch, some new product next year, or to increase profits by 12%, or to become an employee of choice in the, whatever Midwest market or whatever it is. Like those are there, but they're kind of anodyne, is what you're saying.
Yes.
And they may look right on paper, right? Because then I can check the box and say, I identified my customers' goals. Like, look at me, pat myself on the
Yes.
shoulder.
Yes.
But if I really want to get the big impact, if I want to get the 10x deal, if I want to get a much bigger impact, I've got to tap into the emotion and the current of ambition that's
I love
flowing
that.
in my stakeholder, the person who controls the resources.
And it's not just flowing in my stakeholder, it's flowing throughout the entire organization that
Got it.
reports to that stakeholder.
Okay.
That's brilliant. That's a brilliant way of explaining this. I'm looking for the current.
Okay. So how do I, as a, let's say, not super senior account manager, like I'm definitely more junior than my buyers, maybe I'm earlier in my career, and I'm supposed to go and talk to the C-suite or the SVPs or whoever the, economic owners are within this project. How do I even start this conversation? Like, literally, how do I
Yeah.
show up and say, like, what's really driving you? Like, what's behind
Yes.
all this? Oh, what's behind
Yeah.
all the numbers here? How do you do that?
Brilliant. And the reason we need to know this is, again, if they have authority over resources, when that aspiration is challenged, failure is not an option. And therefore, the aspiration is really the foundation of strategy. When we get to that aspiration, we get to the root of strategy. And when the aspiration is challenged, they're going to flex their strategy to see how they can still be successful. So where do we begin? It's hard to begin at the level of their aspiration. So to come in to ask them, well, what are you trying to accomplish? It's like it's too abrupt.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, people don't necessarily want to share their dirty laundry either. So where we have to begin is really in the context, the bigger picture. So in the hero's journey, we're talking about the industry analysis, and we're looking for what we call villains. So heroes, villains. So in the archetype, we're now looking for the villains. The villains have two attributes. So the hero has two important attributes. They have an aspiration where failure is not an option. They have to do this. Their whole reputation, everything. It's not just their reputation. Sometimes we're just talking about their DNA. They're just wired to do this thing, and they found it. They found their lane and the mark that they want to make on humanity or the world. This is who they are, what they must accomplish, and they have authority over resources. So that no matter what gets in their way, they're going to go over, under, around, or through, but they're going to make it happen. So that's one. The villain now has two attributes. We're looking for, number one, the villain is antagonistic to the hero's goals. Whatever it is that the hero is aspiring to achieve, the villain is going to put that in jeopardy. And in the sort of storytelling genre, we would say the villain drives the plot line. The hero doesn't drive the plot line, the villain does. And the villain drives the plot line by putting obstacles in the path of the hero. And it's, in a way, it's like the universe is asking the hero, okay, you say you want this thing. How serious are you? If I keep putting obstacles in your way, will you just give up? And so your story is a tragedy? Or when I put an obstacle in front of you, do you figure out a way? There's a saying, do not pray for your burdens to be lighter, pray to be stronger. And that's what life does to us. It puts obstacles in front of us so that we become stronger, we become more mature. So that's the first attribute we're looking for, is a force that is going to be antagonistic to the hero's goals. And number two, and this is critically important, that the other attribute the villain must have is it must be completely outside of the control of the hero. The hero has all this authority over resources. I've got 20,000 people who report to me, but the villain doesn't report to me. So the villain is free to do whatever it wants, and the hero has absolutely no say and no control. Therefore, all the hero can do is respond to the villain. It cannot control the villain.
Okay. Now, in terms of like the classic, like sales training strategy here, is the villain something as simple as status quo? Like we're always taught, like, go against the status quo, change whatever they're doing today. Is the villain typically a macro trend? Is it a competitor? What are good examples for us to try to get a hold of? It could be budget constraints. It could be something, either macro or political or pandemic, completely outside of my control. Is it inside my company, outside my company? Like, where do we go to find the right one? Because I also presume that we want to be looking for the ultimate bad guy, villain. Yes. And we don't want to settle for one of the underlings, right? Wow. We want to settle for the boss, right? We want to go after the boss, right?
So these are brilliant questions, Alex. Really brilliant. So you've got a couple of things that you've mentioned that I want to tease out. One is there are two characters or two forces that are going to put the hero in jeopardy. One of them is the villain. The other is the hero, him or herself. The hero's flaw, the hero's weakness. This is also going to put the hero and their aspiration in jeopardy. The difference between these two, and it's really important that account managers understand and appreciate this, both of them will put the goal in jeopardy. One of them, the villain, is completely outside of the hero's control. The other, the flaw or the weakness, is within the hero's control. It's up to me to decide, you know what, I'm going to fix this thing. This is my problem. I have to admit I have this problem. I'm going to fix it. Now, so that's the first part of in the question that you asked me, which is really important. Let's tease out, and sometimes salespeople and account managers get confused between a villain and a flaw. If it's something I can fix, it's a flaw. Okay. If it's completely outside of my control, it's a villain. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing, when I'm choosing a villain to highlight, and it's what you said, we want to go after the big boss. And why? Because the bigger the villain, the greater a uniting force it is. So let's put it this way. Let's say you and I both live in Florida and we live on the coastline. And for whatever reason, we don't get along. We don't talk. We see each other. We don't talk. We just pass each other. And it had something to do with our kids maybe years ago. We've even forgotten. That's the state of play right now. Now we hear there's a hurricane, Category 4 hurricane coming, and it's going to make landfall in 72 hours. And entire neighborhoods now have to band together to board up their homes and prepare for this. You know what? All of a sudden, because of that external force and how powerful it is, We're like, this petty thing that we're not talking to each other over, let bygones be bygones, let's bury it.
Okay.
So big villains act as a uniting force. And sometimes in account management, we have customers that maybe even see us as the villain. It's like there's some history in the account and they're frustrated with us, and maybe they're seeing us as a villain in their movie. But if there's a bigger villain, then it's like, let bygones be bygones. Let's figure out how we can work together to challenge
Right.
to navigate this.
Or very common is I see other internal teams as villains because we don't work together that well, or we haven't collaborated, or we've stepped on each other's toes in the past, or something like that. So that, and of course, then we want to reorient all that energy to a bigger villain to get everyone to rally behind the bigger issue.
And just on that point as well, so sometimes I see this with account managers, never pick another department or functional area as a villain in your hero story. You never want to do that. If it's within the organization, lack of communication, silos, inability to work together, these are all flaws because the hero has some influence in terms of addressing these. So you had asked about status quo.
Okay.
Status quo is a flaw. In fact, status quo is our villain. Status quo is really the real competitor that we have. The easiest thing for people to do is what they're already doing. So they're in this inertia. When we're bringing a solution forward to them and asking them to make a decision to move away from status quo, we underestimate just how difficult it is to move out of status quo. This is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So even if you're presenting to me today and I'm like, Alex, this is really exciting. We really need this. And so you leave this meeting excited because of the excitement that you saw in me. You come back a month later, maybe 2 weeks later, that excitement is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've suddenly realized the Herculean effort that's required to change. I wasn't really thinking about the impact on the organization. And I would say organizations are systems, or they're systems of systems. And what we know about systems is they gravitate towards stability and resist change. Change disrupts systems. Systems want predictability. They want stability. When you change,
for sure. Because when you're showing up and you're trying to sell something to someone, you're asking them to change what you're doing today, spend all this time and energy reconfiguring, getting buy-in, buying something, implementing it, changing everything, maintaining it, et cetera, winds up being a huge effort. And unless the benefit isn't 10 or 100 times the effort I'm going to put into it, I'm much better off just doing nothing. But I like the way you phrase this, is that status quo is our villain when we are in sales mode. So that's a super interesting way to be framing it. And I just want to I really want to get into this villain thing to make sure that everybody understands. So what I heard you say was, don't point the finger internally. Don't start to say, oh, if only we could work better with the marketing team, or only if we could overcome these silos or get better communication, or stuff like that, because those are all in our control. And of course, people change jobs, they bring colleagues to different meetings. We certainly don't want to be pointing any fingers at the customer themselves. Much more valuable is to point to big, complex, hairy external threats and issues and get people to rally around that. Now, what do we do to really define what that is?
Okay. So, and this is really important. Villains, I would say, what in my observation, account managers, sales professionals, commercial teams underestimate the value of villains and being able to articulate villains. This is most important. So, for example, I'm in Canada, and 3 months ago, tariffs started to come on the horizon. And, we're busy, we're doing our thing. We know that tariffs, there's some talk about tariffs. Account managers should jump on this. The minute the industry, you see something show up on the radar that is going to potentially change the industry or impact the industry significantly, you need to double click on that and drill down and bring that to the attention of your customer first. You need to be the one to come to your customer to say, you know what, we're hearing the new administration in America is talking about potentially increasing tariffs against Canada. We've looked at your industry. We are concerned. We're familiar with your company and with your goals, and we see the impact that this might have. We'd love to meet with you, share our research with you, and our understanding of how this might impact you and what you can do about it. That approach will get a meeting every time.
That's
because
totally
it's early.
textbook. What you just said is absolute textbook best practice. We should all be thinking that way as account managers. This is us having our risk radars up, paying attention to what's going on in the world, and then sharing that information in a very curated way back to our customer.
But what's happening, Alex, is this. So 3 months ago, tariffs against Canada showed up on the radar. Nobody, let me speak in hyperbole. The account managers don't pay attention to it. Of course, there's going to be good ones that do. Now they do, right? Now they're talking to their customers about tariffs. That ship has sailed. Executives have figured out what they're going to do with the tariffs. So if you're in the steel industry, you figured this out now. So now to come to an executive in the steel industry to say, hey, tariffs are going to impact you, I'd like to meet with you, they have no interest.
Yep.
You have to be able to bring something to their attention well ahead of time. And so this is where industry analysis and SWOT analysis, these two analyses are real great tools for an account manager to have in their golf bag. So they can pull out these clubs and start swinging these when they start to see things happening in the industry.
And so this is awesome. And by the way, this is one of these things where so many account managers just virtually rolled their eyes at us because they thought, boy, the number of times that I was told to be strategic and to do industry analysis and to sit down and do a SWOT analysis. And they're like, oh my God, I've heard this so many times. And meanwhile, I've got customers blowing up over here, an RFP due over there, this thing's happening, I've got a QBR, et cetera. And so I think, Adrian, this is a really, really important topic and something we need to wedge in here. Like the account managers out there today are being told, do more with less, right? They're being told you don't get as big a team, you don't get as many resources. There's just not as much operations support behind what they're doing. And then they hear you saying, we need to be doing industry analysis, we need to do SWOT analysis on our customers and on us and so on, which is all, I agree, the way to get really big exponential results and to be a great partner to our customers. But there's so much tension for the people who are in the field, the people who are out there doing this stuff, and they're being pulled in these different directions. So how do you coach someone through that who comes to you with that sort of tension or issue?
Yeah, very great question. So a couple of things. Number one is the power of emotion is tied to goals. We are emotional beings because we are goal oriented. From birth, the sort of biological imperative is survival. That's a goal, and we're emotional about survival. So the reason we're here is because our emotions took over whenever we were at risk or something was going to be beneficial to our survival. So understanding this insight is really critical. When I'm talking to my external stakeholders, I always want to speak to them in the context of their goals. That it's amazing. You and I could make the same presentation to the same stakeholder, but you teed it up by talking about their goals first. And I just made the presentation. I get a flat no and a hard no. You get, yes, let's talk further about this because you activated their emotion first. So the account manager really has a dual job. They have to identify the hero within their external account. They also have to identify the hero internally. Whenever I ask account managers, how many accounts are you responsible for? Whatever their answer is, I always say +1. And the +1 is their own account, their own company. You have to treat that.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to treat your internal company as a strategic account. And that means within your own company, you need to know who's the hero and what is their aspiration. And you need to tie your work to their aspirations, and they'll run interference for you. When you need resources or resources are going to be taken away from you, because they understand that the work that you're doing is tied to their goals, they're emotionally engaged and invested, and they're going to run interference for you.
So that's deep. That's deep. So yes. So I'm doing account management for my customers, and then I'm turning it around and doing it on my boss and my team.
100%. And you're learning, you got the same initiative, you've got the same idea, but you're able to articulate it differently, externally and internally, and get emotional engagement around your idea. So that's number one. Number two, I think, and this happened to me, I just sort of fell into this. The more successful I became initially as a salesperson, the more they would hire more salespeople and give me less territory. And I found that terribly annoying, right? It's like, I'm the one who's being successful here. I had all of Canada. Now you're telling me I have half of Canada. Now you're telling me I only have Ontario. And so the more successful I became, they were able to add more salespeople, give me less territory. The less territory they gave me, the more successful I became, the more focused I became. So it was kind of paradoxical until the last one was when they said, Adrian, we don't want to give you a geography anymore. We want to give you a vertical. You will now be responsible for the telecommunications industry. Well, I was annoyed again because I felt like my territory keeps shrinking, but that's when my career really took off. And what happened, the only difference was when I was responsible for a geographic territory, I was going into all these different industries every day and being an expert in my product, but not in the customer. When they shifted me, and I can still remember it, Alex, my first meeting with a telco. And they were talking, they talk in TLAs, three-letter acronyms. And they were talking in these three-letter, I had no idea what they were talking about. I was just sitting in this meeting. I felt so stupid. I was in Toronto. We had at the time the world's biggest bookstore. I don't know if you know this
No,
shop.
I don't.
It was a huge bookstore. I left that meeting. This bookstore was maybe 10 minutes away. I didn't pass go. I didn't stop. I just went straight to that bookstore. I bought a big, thick book on telecommunications. And that same day, I started reading it. And eventually, I came to understand the industry. And I could now talk in terms of the industry language as an insider. And that's when I became extremely successful. So all of that to say, account managers need to pick a lane. It might not be your only lane, but pick a lane and become an expert in the industry. And we recommend, like, just if you can devote 15 minutes a day, and most account managers will acknowledge, if this is important to me, I can devote 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
You would be surprised within a month how much information you've gathered, how it sits in your brain and begins to make new connections, and how you show up and you just begin to speak differently when you're in meetings.
Totally. Okay, got it. So that was that's the power of being specialized and highly focused and vertical. And so therefore, to go back to your comments on the hero's journey, part of establishing the goals and understanding the company, your customer, what they're trying to do is industry analysis. So this is you understanding the bigger picture of this industry, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You do those from the perspective of the customer in their world. You 100%. Don't do these from this is not my opportunity to sell you more stuff, the threat of me not being able to sell you more stuff. This is SWOT from the point of view of the customer in their industry. That's how you start to understand what's going on for them.
Exactly. Can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Because that's very insightful. The SWOT analysis in particular must be done from the customer's perspective. And you cannot do this if you do not understand their aspirations. So the SWOT analysis begins with the customer's aspirations. And then we're asking ourselves at an industry level, what are the things that are happening that are going to help them and what's going to hurt them? And then inside their organization, what will help them and what will hurt them? So anything that will help that's external is an opportunity. Anything that will hurt and is external is a threat. Anything that will help but it's internal, it's a strength. And anything that will help but it's external is this is the opportunity. So when we do this SWOT analysis this way, so help or hinder, internal or external, that's where we get so strengths and weaknesses are internal and opportunities and threats are external.
Right.
Having done that analysis, you need to lean on the threats and the weaknesses because the strengths and the opportunities are really all the reasons they don't need you. All the reasons why they'll be fine pursuing their goal without you. It's the emerging threats, which are the villains, that are going to create a sense of urgency for them to act. And it's the weaknesses where you're going to help them address those weaknesses to be successful. So in the hero's journey, the threats are let me say it this way. In the hero's journey, the hero positions their aspirations based on their strengths. And they pursue these opportunities based on their strengths. Because we are wired and have certain capabilities, we can pursue these opportunities in the marketplace. The threats are the villains that are emerging that are going to knock them off their game. That gets their attention. If they don't act, it's not because of the threat, it's because of their weaknesses that they'll fall into what we call the pit of despair, where they will suffer. And the only way out, because they cannot fix the threat, they cannot fix the villain, the only way out is to fix the weakness. And that villain creates a sense of urgency for them to call you in to address the status quo, because the weakness is in the status quo. And you want to show up not as the hero, you want to show up as the guide on the side that is able to help the hero navigate this, address the weakness, so they can emerge in the third act, which is the new world.
So you're Yoda, you're not Luke Skywalker.
100%. I just wrote an article on this.
Okay.
Exactly.
So the everyone's challenge here is to go become Yoda for your customers.
That's
your customer is Luke Skywalker and you're Yoda. So Adrian, let's then tie this back to the emotional component of the aspirations.
Yes.
So we talked about understanding, we get to the aspirations by breaking down what are the big picture things. First of all, we don't walk into a meeting with our customer C-suite and say, what are your emotional aspirations and attachments to this project? That's not what we do. We talk about big picture stuff. We then are able to distill that down to a handful, I'd imagine 2 or 3 emotionally charged elements. We'll call it that. We then bring our analysis of their industry and of their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to provide additional context and color to whatever's going on here. And then we're meant to act as a guide for our customer. At what point do we then kind of hand the lightsaber over to Luke Skywalker? Like when does that happen? When does it happen? When do we sort of pass all this stuff back to them and say, okay, I understand that this project is really important to you because of X, Y, and Z. So here's what we're gonna do. How do we then turn it back onto the personal side?
Alex, I got to say, you asked brilliant questions, very, very insightful. So we want to have this meeting with our customer that basically says, you're very valuable to us. We're seeing some changes in the industry or even globally, that are concerning us because we believe they're going to have a detrimental impact on your ability to achieve your goals. So we're going to have this meeting. We're going to talk to them about the changing landscape that we see. We're going to ask them, is this what they're seeing, or what else are they seeing? And basically, whatever they say, whether they're seeing it as well as us or they're seeing other things, the fact that these things are outside of their control puts them in a sense of jeopardy and creates a sense of urgency to act. At that point, we want to then say, let's get validated on what your goals and aspirations are, and what is the change that needs to be made in order to successfully navigate this emerging threat. So let's say, for example, it was tariffs. Then what is the change that has to be made? Maybe it's looking at the supply chain and not being so vulnerable in the supply chain. And that's something that we're going to bring this to your attention because we can help you with it. So when do we hand over the lightsaber to Luke Skywalker? I think this is now a collaborative exercise. Let's confirm what needs to be fixed and how it needs to be fixed and what is the value of fixing it. And then once there's agreement that, there's great value here, then let's collaborate on what the solution actually looks like. So it's a matter of validating the villains or the villain. You can have more than one villain, but not, 1 to 3, but a major one is really the key. That's what we're after, because that creates a sense I've got to act. Mm-hmm. Then let's validate the aspiration or the strategic goal that's being brought into jeopardy as a result of the villain. Then let's confirm, what can you do? You can't fix the villain. Right? I can't say to Donald Trump, knock it off, right? He's looking after America. I'm in Canada. So we have no say over that. Well, what can we do? Well, maybe you can look at your supply chain, and that's something that we could help you forecast better or predict whatever it is that we have. We're going to now enter into a collaborative conversation and a kind of co-creation conversation about how we can work together to be successful around your aspiration.
Got it. And along the way, we're controlling the narrative, and we're also planting the story back to them, right? So we're then creating the frame. And if it's one of the things I saw this thing recently where someone was talking about, one of the reasons a lot of people get into fights and arguments is because everyone's trying to solve the problem. They're all arguing for their solutions without actually having defined what the problem is first, and getting clarity on the problem. So to your point here, we've got to spend extra time on the villain. and we have to really, really understand what the villain is, because the villain is external, outside of our control, something that's in our way, something that's a friction point. But if we don't get it right, we're shooting at the wrong target.
Correct.
And so we really got to double down on that. And then as we're doing that, then we're able to use the words of our customers, provide them with additional words. And this creates a huge, like, competitive moat around the customer.
Huge. If
right?
I could just take this another level down, because this is very deep where you're going. You use the word frame. So psychologically, the customer has a frame, and what a frame is it's their explanation of how the world works. It's their understanding of the patterns that they recognize in how the world works, and they craft their strategy within that frame. And the more successful they are in executing their strategy, the more the frame hardens, because now they're absolutely confident they know how the world works. And so they're not going to listen to anybody else because they've got it figured out. What the villain does is the villain threatens the frame and then shatters it. So what happens is when the hero confronts the villain and begins to lose, and things begin to unravel and they fall into the pit of despair, that frame gets shattered to the point where they go from feeling confident to feeling confused. They thought they knew how everything worked. Now they're not so sure. Now they need help. And it's that shattering of the frame. There's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's that shattering of the frame that opens the door for the account manager to come in as Yoda. Because I don't know how the world works. And so what Yoda is doing in that moment is helping the hero to reframe. Help me put the pieces back together. And with this new insight into the world changing, help me understand how the world works now. Because I thought I knew how it worked before. And it did work that way before. It's just changed. So Yoda is helping the hero to reframe. And it's that reframing, that's the foundation of developing a new strategy. And it's that new strategy that pulls them out of the pit of despair and takes them to success. So I think the account manager is not the hero. I'm not Luke Skywalker. I'm Yoda. And my job is to see that Luke Skywalker, before he develops a new strategy, he needs a new understanding of how the world works. And that's what I'm bringing.
Whew, man, there's a lot here.
There is.
What else are we missing on the hero's journey here, Adrian?
I think it's the importance of suffering. That you and I, we are where we are today. I don't know your backstory, but I know that you've suffered, because that's the only
Indeed,
way.
Yes.
Yes. You don't have to tell me. I just know you have a calmness about you. You have a wisdom about you. You have a patience about you. We're not born with that. That is born of suffering. And I think when we are in the role of selling, we underestimate the power of suffering. And suffering doesn't have to be like, how shall I say, experienced in in reality. We suffer vicariously. I don't know if anybody in the audience has watched a movie and a tear has come to their eyes, or they've felt incredible joy when they're watching a movie or reading a story. It's somebody else's story, but you feel it because there's these mirror neurons that enable us to live vicariously in others. This is what I was doing without realizing. When I was an account manager selling technology, and I was telling other people's stories, I didn't realize it. I was moving people emotionally. And I was taking them into the pit of despair emotionally, showing them what could go wrong just by telling a story. And then taking them to the summit of success just by telling a story. So I think suffering is unpleasant. And if we're having a conversation and I begin to ask you about what could go wrong, if the world is changing, the villain is changing the world or your world and the industry, and what could possibly go wrong and you could lose everything, I find account managers and sales professionals tend to stop short. Instead of asking that next question, well, what else could go wrong? What is the worst case scenario? And allowing them to go there. Because it's unpleasant, we short circuit the whole thing and we want to quickly offer relief. If we offer relief too quickly, we don't shatter the frame. The frame is shattered through suffering. and they can suffer vicariously. And the way we get them to suffer vicariously is through storytelling, but also through the questions that we ask. And sometimes we ask questions to get information, but sometimes we ask questions to give information. It's like Socrates. He knew the answer, but he would ask the question so that his disciples would have to process it and come to the conclusion themselves. So I would say asking questions, creating an environment where people can be comfortable and relaxed with you and trust you, but then asking questions where they really have to entertain the consequences of inaction. If we do not take action, what are the consequences? And to really let them go there. Don't just let one domino fall. Let it knock down the whole chain of dominoes. And they realize what is really at risk. I think this is an important part of the hero's journey.
Wow, amazing. What a dynamite conversation and reframe from you, because you're helping us to reframe some of these ideas around it's not personal, it's business, and like what kind of questions we're asking. But what I'm really hearing from this, what I'm really taking away here, and I want to make sure the whole audience is paying attention to, is we've got to go deeper in figuring out what reality looks like for our customers. We've got to be very, very committed to identifying the villains throughout this entire thing, to use Adrian's language here around heroes and villains. We've got to figure out what those are, and don't stop until you got the right one. Don't capitulate too early, like you were saying. Don't offer relief too early. Ask the tough questions, because that's where the gold is when it comes to working with customers. I think this is a fantastic framework. I'm going to use it. I encourage everyone to use it. I encourage everyone to read your book and to learn more about this stuff, because this is a really great framework for how to approach it. Really appreciate you being here and sharing all this with us today. Adrian Davis, thanks for joining me on Account Management Secrets.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Alex.